money became worthless tomorrow, completely, totally worthless, what would actually save you? History has already answered this, and the answer might surprise you. Imagine waking up one morning, walking to your local bakery and finding out that the bread you bought yesterday for $1 now costs $4 trillion. Not 400, not 4,000, $4 trillion. That's not a nightmare. That actually happened. In Weimar Germany, 1923, a single loaf of bread cost 200 billion marks. Women were seen pushing wheelbarrows full of cash through the streets, not to show off their wealth but just to buy groceries. And by afternoon, the prices had already doubled again. This is hyperinflation. And before you say that could never happen today, let me remind you, it happened in Zimbabwe in 2008. It happened in Venezuela between 2016 and 2019. It happened in Hungary, Yugoslavia, Argentina, and over 50 countries throughout modern history. Hyperinflation is not ancient mythology. It is a very real, very documented collapse of everything you thought money meant. Let's start with who got absolutely destroyed when currencies collapsed. In Weimar Germany, the middle class was wiped out almost overnight. Doctors, lawyers, teachers, government officials, people who had spent their entire careers saving in marks, watched their life savings evaporate. A German professor who had saved carefully for 30 years found that his entire bank balance could no longer buy a cup of coffee. Retired people living on fixed pensions were essentially left with nothing. Their money was technically still there in the bank, in the account, but it bought nothing. Absolutely nothing. The same story played out in Zimbabwe decades later. Teachers and nurses abandoned their jobs because their government salaries had become meaningless. One Zimbabwean farmer sold a goat for 40 billion Zimbabwean dollars and used that money to buy just 2 beers. The government eventually ran out of ink and paper to even print the bills properly, so they printed on only one side to save resources. The pattern is painfully clear. The people who trusted paper currency, who kept their wealth in cash, in savings accounts, in fixed income investments, lost everything. So who survived? Who actually came out the other side intact? History gives us 4 very clear answers. Number 1. Farmers and landowners. In Weimar Germany, farmers thrived. Why? Because they owned something real. Land doesn't evaporate. Food doesn't lose its value just because a government prints too much paper. Farmers could sell their produce at whatever the current price was, accept the rapidly devaluing currency, and immediately convert it into physical assets, equipment, more land, paying off debts with worthless paper. There are stories of farmers coming into Berlin and buying grand pianos and luxury goods, not because they were rich, but because they understood that a piano held more real value than a wheelbarrow of marks. Landowners were also able to pay off their mortgages with currency that had become nearly worthless. A debt that once represented years of savings could be erased for almost nothing. The land stayed. The debt disappeared. Number 2. Gold and hard assets. In 1919, 1 gold mark equaled 1 paper mark in Germany. By November 1923, it took 1 trillion paper marks to buy that same gold mark. Gold didn't change. The mark collapsed. Anyone holding gold or foreign currencies kept their wealth perfectly intact. Anyone holding cash lost everything. This pattern repeated in Zimbabwe. When the Zimbabwean dollar became worthless, people who had gold, silver, or US dollars could still buy food, still negotiate, still survive. The same was true in Venezuela, where the US dollar became the real currency of daily transactions even while the official currency was still technically in circulation. Hard assets, gold, silver, foreign currencies, physical commodities, acted as a lifeboat when the monetary system drowned. Number 3. Tradable skills. Here's something the history books don't emphasize enough. During hyperinflation, barter economies emerge rapidly. When cash becomes worthless, what you can do with your hands, your knowledge, or your expertise becomes your real currency. In Weimar Germany, workers in essential industries, manufacturing, transportation, utilities, were able to strike and demand wages that kept pace with inflation. They had something irreplaceable: labor the economy needed. Tradespeople, mechanics, farmers, doctors who accepted food or goods as payment. These people kept functioning when the financial system was in total chaos. Skills are one form of wealth that cannot be printed away and cannot be confiscated by a collapsing government. Number 4. A network of trust. This one is harder to quantify, but it is perhaps the most powerful. During both the Weimar crisis and Zimbabwe's collapse, tight communities, neighbors who trusted each other, local trading networks, families with shared resources, fared dramatically better than isolated individuals. Barter systems emerged neighborhood by neighborhood. People traded vegetables for shoes, medical services for firewood, carpentry for food. Social capital, real human relationships, and community trust became an economic lifeline. So, what is the actual lesson here? History is telling us loudly and repeatedly that wealth stored purely as paper or digital numbers in an account is only as strong as the institution behind it. And institutions, as we have seen, can fail. The question is not whether you trust your government today. The question is whether your financial life is built in a way that can survive if that trust turns out to be misplaced. The people who survived hyperinflation were not necessarily the richest before the crisis. They were the people who owned things: land, gold, productive skills, community relationships. They were the people who understood that real value comes from the physical world, not from the promise printed on a piece of paper. History has already answered the question. The people who came out alive were the ones who stopped treating money as the final destination and started treating it as just a tool to acquire things that actually last.